We're now just 3 months away from the NFL season, and that means the time to jump into redraft fantasy football drafts is rapidly approaching. Today, I have some defensive lineman rankings to help with those IDP drafts in just a second. We're going to get through DL1 through DL4, so hang tight. I'll be back in just a sec. Welcome back to another week of the IDP Plus podcast. I'm your host, Axton Harding, on this show, and every week we've been giving you rankings for the Dynasty rankings for the last month or so. I think we're still wrapping that up, but now it's actually time to get into redraft rankings. The new league year has started, and we're going to get into some early redraft rankings for your IDP leagues. As I mentioned before, we're going to go through DL1 through DL4s. We're going to hit 48 defensive linemen today, so buckle up and grab some popcorn and a drink because we're about to jump into it right now. So we'll go DL 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. We'll kind of have scenes set up here. So we'll jump into defensive linemen ones, the 1 through 12s. Up first, we've got defensive lineman or TJ Watt as defensive lineman 1. Defensive lineman 2, we've got Maxx Crosby. Defensive lineman 3, we've got Micah Parsons. Defensive lineman 4, Nick Bosa of the San Francisco 49ers. Defensive lineman 5 is Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns. And defensive lineman 6 is Aiden Hutchinson of the Detroit Lions. Defensive lineman 7, Danielle Hunter of the Houston Texans. Defensive lineman 8, Brian Burns of the New York Giants. Defensive lineman 9, Andrew Van Ginkel of the Minnesota Vikings. Defensive lineman 10, Nick Bonito. Defensive lineman 11, Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals. And then rounding out our defensive lineman 1s is Jared Verse of the LA Rams. So just kind of going back up to the top of this list, we'll kind of briefly hit on some guys and jump into a couple of players per series, I guess, per group. We'll kind of jump in a little bit more there on occasion as we go through the show. Should you guys want any kind of explanation or outlook on any one of these players, please throw it in the comments, and I'll see about getting a little bit more of a deep dive for you, or make my case if you want an explanation as to why somebody might be high or low in comparison to kind of where you feel they might be valued overall. But here's what I've got, 1 through 48, and right now we're going to jump into the top 12 here. So TJ Watt, Maxx Crosby, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson all kind of fall in kind of the same grouping for me. The way I kind of have it ordered here is kind of based on like upside and floor and a mixture of both as it relates to production for IDP. So TJ Watt easily has the best upside, the most game-breaking ability when it comes to IDP. I don't think that's any question in anybody's eyes. For the full season, he can break the game of IDP. So on a week-to-week basis, he's by far got the highest ceiling of anybody here. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You guys aren't here for the top-end defensive talent. But we'll still kind of briefly touch on these guys. Maxx Crosby, I've got him next because he's getting the most snaps of any of these guys, and he's got an upside of 15 or more sacks. And with the amount of snaps that he plays, he's also got a very high tackle floor as well that could go up to 80 or 90 tackles for a defensive lineman. That's outstanding, especially for our edge rushers here. So Micah Parsons comes in third, defensive lineman 3 for the Dallas Cowboys. He's really just made a home at 12 sacks for a floor, which is outstanding. But we know that he's kind of got that TJ Watt upside. We just want to see him and kind of we just want to see him break through that ceiling that he's kind of put on himself. He's really been consistent in terms of overall play year to year since entering the league. But I really want to see him just pop big time because I feel like he's got 15 to 20 sack upside. And he's got a respectable tackle floor as well. So you just hope that maybe he can get a little bit more help on defense. He's kind of been a little bit injured himself, but he's also had a lot of personnel injuries around him that's kind of hampered his ability to really just break that ceiling of production. So Micah Parsons, I think this season could bode well for him. Nonetheless, he's got one of the highest floors in the league in terms of fantasy football production for IDP. My defensive lineman 4 here at Nick Bosa. He's probably got upside to kind of even jump a spot or two on this list, but we've kind of seen him regress a little bit compared to what we've seen his upside really be. And in the last couple of years, that's where I've kind of bumped Nick Bosa down a little bit. But again, we've seen this incredible floor that he can, that he's displayed for us so far already in his career. And he's got a 50 tackle floor, which is great. That's ideal for our defensive lineman. And then, like I said, he's got 15 to 20 sack upside. It's just the last couple of seasons since his 18.5 sack season in 2022, we've seen him fall down to 10.5 and 9 sacks. So that's why I've got him bumped down here. But again, he's got the nice floor and a great ceiling for sacks. So just want to see him kind of pop back closer to that 15 to 18 sack range from a few years ago before we move him up here. Myles Garrett rounds out the veteran edge rushers, which Aiden Hutchinson, I'm not going to say he's not a veteran, but he's quite a bit younger than the rest of these guys. But Myles Garrett of this group rounds out the older guys here. And the reason I've got him down at the bottom is just because he's more reliant on sacks than the rest of these guys. Just because he's got a 15 to 20 sack ceiling, he does definitely, and he's displayed that year over year, especially for the last 4 years where he's had no less than 14 sacks in any season. He just doesn't quite have that consistent tackling floor that we like to see. He really hovers around 40 to 50 sacks as opposed to like 50 to 60. He can get up to 50 to 60, and he has back in 2021, 2022. But then he kind of dropped back down to the 40s in the tackle department the last couple of seasons. And we've also seen his IDP production dip as well in terms of fantasy football. Just a little bit, not anything that's crazy, but he's just a guy that if he could add more tackles to his game, he could easily climb this list. But historically, we just haven't seen him get any more than 60 tackles in a season. That's going to be the difference maker for a guy like this, because he's set a very high floor for himself in terms of in the sack department. The only thing he could do to really improve in terms of that floor is just add more tackles to his game, or get more tackles for loss, just add some value elsewhere, because that sack ceiling is outstanding. It's great. It's reliable. But it can only go so high. So at this point, it's about as high as it can get for a steady floor. But again, we want to see those tackles, that tackling floor, come back up in order to justify moving him up. Aiden Hutchinson rounds out this kind of elite tier of edge rushers in the defensive lineman category. I've got him at the bottom for obvious reasons, just mainly due to injury. I imagine that he will have likely slow start, but a guy like this with such a high motor, who is getting upwards of 10 pressures a game in the 5 games that he was playing last year before he went down with an injury, that was hands down, that was just like double of the next person in the league in terms of generating pressure at that time during that span. So Aiden Hutchinson definitely deserves to be drafted among these top end edge rushers, as he's going to play the whole season. You're just probably not going to get top end level production early on, and as the season goes, it's probably when you're going to start to see more down the line where he really pops. But also that's kind of where it matters the most, right? When you kind of get down the season, you're getting down the stretch, you're trying to make playoffs, you're trying to make a playoff push, you want your guys to perform later on. And right now, Aiden Hutchinson might even be a value at DL6, because I've got him at DL1 in my dynasty rankings, because fully healthy, he was generating pressure like nobody else on this list. So Aiden Hutchinson, DL6. You could probably make a case to drop him even more depending on where you feel that he's going to be this season. But I feel like he will bounce back as the season kind of comes along. He should progress, and you should see his numbers really start to jump up as the season goes on. But again, there's worry there, there's risk there. So I understand anybody who might pass on him for somebody else at this point. Defensive lineman 7, Danielle Hunter. And defensive lineman 8, Brian Burns, are kind of two similar players. They're just a notch down from the guys above. They've got a few less sacks on average and about 10 to 15 tackles roughly difference between these guys as well. And let's see here, Brian Burns. I guess we'll start back with Danielle Hunter. He's got actually a really nice ceiling that we like to see, especially after you get past that top tier of edge rushers. He's really displayed over the course of like 8 or 10 seasons so far, a nice 12 to 15, even upwards of 16 to 17 sacks in a single season. And he's also got that 40 to 60 sack or tackle floor as well that we really like to see in our defensive linemen as well. And so Danielle Hunter's just a tried and true guy that's going to come bring his lunch pail to work, a guy you can rely on week in and week out, and he's not just going to completely fall flat for you and disappear. He's got big week-to-week upside where he can get you upwards of 3 sacks, 7 tackles in a single game, like he showed us last year, even in his age 29 season. So Danielle Hunter definitely has the higher upside of these two, Brian Burns and Hunter. But also has a little bit lower floor than maybe what Brian Burns brings to the table. And if we look at some Brian Burns stats, he's got more of like a what did I say for Danielle Hunter? He's got more of a 40 to 60 tackle floor, and Brian Burns has more of like a 50 to 70 tackle floor. So the tackles make a difference over the course of a season in terms of reliability, just week-to-week production. Brian Burns isn't typically one of those guys that even if he doesn't get a sack, it's just going to be completely leaving you out to dry. You'll get 3 or 4 or 5 tackles in a game, still keep you somewhat competitive that week. That's where Danielle Hunter has a little bit lower floor, but Brian Burns doesn't have that 2 to 3 sack upside that Danielle Hunter has. So kind of my reasoning for Danielle Hunter over Brian Burns here. But then we'll get into a little bit of Andrew Van Ginkel, Nick Benito, and Trey Hendrickson. Van Ginkel and Nick Benito, a couple of guys who've really popped onto this scene the last couple of years and made a name for themselves. They've got some year-over-year production, and they didn't really fall off the map here. So we like us Andrew Van Ginkel and Nick Benito. Trey Hendrickson, I kind of worry about contract disputes right now, but we'll kind of see. I'm not really all that concerned right now because we still have a few months before we get into the season. But more or less, these three have shown exceptional seasons in one particular area or another. And guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, more than just one area. So Van Ginkel in particular has reached 11.5 sacks and 79 tackles last year. Also had 2 pick sixes to add to his game, so he's really great in coverage. The tackles were great. The sacks were good in 2024, but we wonder if that's his ceiling or if he's just getting started. So we see another year of this kind of sack production. This is about as high as I can get him in my rankings in terms of AVG. Nick Benito had 13.5 sacks last year. He's showing some pretty big upside in splash plays, but we're not quite there with just 48 tackles. So we don't really have quite the kind of tackling floor that we'd like to see from a guy like this, but he's showing a lot of sack upside. So he just got his full-time role, so we'll be patient. Nonetheless, he's displayed a super consistent play overall, where he can show you that he has some game-to-game upside, but also at the same time he likes to spread those sacks out throughout the season, which makes it nice for a guy who doesn't quite have the tackling floor that we like in our defensive linemen. Trey Hendrickson has showed elite upside in the last couple of years with 17.5 sacks, but much like Myles Garrett in the top tier, he kind of falls short in the tackling department. I don't expect him to continue to reach 17.5 sack mark year over year, but he's kind of got a high enough floor at like 13 or 14 that I think it's going to be worthy of keeping him up here in this DL1 category. So again, Trey Hendrickson being the top of the league in the last couple of years, being a late breakout. He did it at 28 years old. 17.5 sacks is a pretty high mark to hit, especially 2 years in a row. That's really impressive. I imagine that he will have a great year this year. Again, I think we can expect him to kind of fall back to that 13 to 14 sack range. But again, I can't really rely on that 17.5 sack season again. I think we can expect a little bit of negative regression considering where he's finished the last 2 seasons. And he's not historically been one of those top-end finishers. He's been really up there towards the I'm not going to say not top end, top. He has been among the top and just not necessarily up among the elite edge rushers year over year, just the last couple of seasons. So I think we can expect a little bit of positive or negative regression from him this season. So Trey Hendrickson, definitely a nice player. I think he should be fine. Just don't expect 17.5 sacks moving forward. Now to round out the DL1s, we've got Jared Verse, and this might be a little bit hot takey, but this rookie was top 10 in the following categories among qualifying edge rushers according to PFF. He was 5th in solo tackles with 41. He was 4th in assists with 16. He was 2nd in quarterback hurries with 56. 5th in quarterback hits with 15, and he was 4th in pressures with 77. He's doing his job and making quarterbacks sweat. He even admitted to leaving sacks on the field in a press conference earlier this offseason. He was 42nd overall at the position in sacks and 4th in pressures. So to me, this combination of statistics compounded together with the tackling floor and even say a 15% conversion rate, which would be 2% less than Myles Garrett, we're looking at 11.5, 12 sacks if he can maintain this kind of production next season. So the upside is too good here, and I think he will convert. A guy like this really has a high motor, and he's admitted himself to leaving sacks on the field with the kind of pressures he's able to generate. I think there's definitely a lot of room for positive progression for Jared Verse to improve upon his 4.5 sacks from a year ago. 42nd overall in sacks, 4th in pressures. Something's not right. He's back there putting pressure on the quarterback. We just want to see him convert, and I think this is going to be the season that he does that. I think he's going to be hungry for it, and I think we're going to see Jared Verse finish among the top end defensive linemen and find himself as a defensive lineman 1 in 2025. Before we get into defensive lineman 2, I just want to talk a little bit about some best ball. So if you're anything like me, you like to enjoy something in the off season, you want something to do to feed that fantasy beast inside of you and stay sharp on player ADPs to shape your drafts. Best ball is a great way to do that in the off season. You draft your team and forget about it because the league automatically scores your best lineup every week. So you can draft dozens of teams and have zero maintenance. You don't have to go back and set your lineups every week. So you can just draft, have fun, pick up to 33 lineups with Fast Draft, and check back after the season's done to see if you won any of the thousands of dollars that they have available through payouts through hundreds of places in this tournament style format. They have offense only, where you pick 6 flex players. They have only IDP rookie drafts. I'm going to advocate for the defensive drafts. They're super fun. Get into Fast Draft, download it today, and use code +ACT for a up to a $50 deposit match today. You download $50, they'll give you $50. You can draft 10 drafts of the up, get 6 IDPs, check back at the end of the year, see if you placed among the top, I think 200 or 300 players and won some cash. First place gets $2,000. So use code +AX, get your $50 deposit match, and start drafting faster today. Get into Fast Draft, guys. They take like 10 minutes to draft once they fill up. Super fun. Keep your wits sharp, and stay sharp for the fantasy season this year. So now let's get into our DL2s. For DL13, we've got Will Anderson. DL14, Jonathan Grenard of the Texans. DL15, we've got Harold Landry, now of the New England Patriots. DL16, we've got DeForest Buckner of the Colts. DL17, we've got Trayvon Walker of the Jacksonville Jaguars. DL18, we've got Montez Sweat of the Chicago Bears. DL19, we've got Josh Hines-Allen of the Jaguars. DL20, we've got Zach Sealer of the Miami Dolphins. DL21, we've got Khalil Mack of the Chargers. DL22, we've got Leonard Williams of the Seahawks. DL23, we've got Jonathan Cooper of the Denver Broncos. DL24, Dexter Lawrence rounds us out at DL24 of the New York Giants. So let's jump back up to the top of this list, talk a little bit about Will Anderson, a hyper-efficient sack artist who really doesn't have much of a ceiling right now because he's so early in his career. We may have a Myles Garrett in the making here, but he's yet to flash that kind of ceiling. He's definitely taking steps forward since his first year in the league, but he's not really generating the kind of pressure that we like to see from those elite edge rushers. He was 25th overall last season in generating pressure, and he was only 7th in sacks at the position. So again, not really generating pressure, but he was converting. So we have a highly efficient sack artist, like I was saying earlier. Guy's not among the top in the pressure generating department, but he's converting at a high rate. So we like to see that, but it doesn't really leave a whole lot of room to be desired, because unless he's going to be generating more pressures, this tells me that we can expect even possibly some regression from last season if he doesn't bring up the pressure rate. So at this point in my drafts, I generally probably go linebacker as opposed to Will Anderson, just because we're not seeing, everything's not really quite making sense. If he was among the top 10, 15, even 20 in generating pressure, then I would feel a lot better about that being top 10 in sacks at the position last year and having the potential to even add more sacks to his game moving forward. Now, I'm not going to say that he can't, because I mean, who's to say what's going to happen? Maybe he's doing the right things and he's going to increase that pressure rate in order to convert more. But at this point, I'm not seeing the kind of numbers that are telling me this is what's going to happen. So like a Jared Verse, who is generating a lot of pressure and not converting, that tells me he's due for a breakout. Will Anderson kind of tells me almost the opposite. So I just want to see it from Will Anderson. The numbers aren't quite telling me that I can expect a huge improvement upon last season. Jonathan Grenard at DL 14 of the Minnesota Vikings is next. He doesn't have so much of a tackle floor, kind of like Will Anderson, but he's got more than a handful of sacks, and he sits around 12 on a year-to-year basis. So that kind of seems where he will top out. It doesn't really have that breakthrough ceiling like some of these guys above him, but Jonathan Grenard has been a guy that's finished among the top end edge rushers for much of his career. So like Jonathan Grenard there as kind of I don't want to say, he's kind of like the leftovers of the elite guys. He always kind of ends up finishing up there, but he's not really going to break that mold and jump into the elite tier like a Will Anderson or Jared Verse could. So I think this is kind of where he's going to top out, is at about 12 sacks. Let's see, 50 to 60 tackles. So he's got the kind of floor that we like to see in terms of tackles. We just don't have quite the upside in terms of the sack department. But he's going to be there for you, and he's going to put up some numbers and help you out on a week-to-week basis, because he's a guy that can get up to 3 sacks in a single game. So he's got that week-to-week upside. He can just kind of disappear here and there. But again, he's gonna with that kind of upside and the kind of tackling floor that we have. So he's one of those guys that will be fine for you. He's just not necessarily my preference. Him and Will Anderson at this point in drafts, I kind of just tend to go linebacker personally. So now we get into some Harold Landry. Outside of a tackling floor of right around 70, he's got a sack upside at no less than 9 in the last 3 seasons. Harold Landry is one of these guys that I like as a value this season. I think the only caveat is going to be the usage that he gets whenever we see him in New England, because New England has been historically a rotational kind of team under Bill Belichick for much of the last 20 years. We've seen this defensive line and linebacking core, just the overall defense, rotate. So we haven't really got the kind of snaps we'd like to see from full-time players on this team. But we've got a new coaching regime, and we're hoping, I think a lot of us are expecting, but I'm more hoping that we kind of see a regime change and in the changing of the guard, we also see kind of some scheme changes where we have less rotation and we can kind of more rely on some guys for our fantasy football. So Harold Landry being historically right around 9 to 12 sacks and 60 to 80 tackles is a great floor for us in fantasy football. So Harold Landry, an undervalued, underappreciated, but high floor player. He doesn't quite have the kind of, I guess he's got like a 2 sack upside, but he's not just got 8 tackle, 3 sack upside in terms of any single game. He's just going to be a steady Eddie and have a high floor for you. Kind of like the next guy we've got on our list here at DL 16, DeForest Buckner, who comes in at defensive tackle 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. He's a nitty gritty defensive tackle who's done it for us for years. And, he's also one of these guys that, with our defensive tackles, the reason he's ranked so high is because he does present such a great tackling floor at 60 to 80 tackles each year, something we can absolutely rely on for fantasy football production. And then, you pair that with a 6 to 9 tackle upside for a defensive tackle. That's outstanding, especially in your defensive tackle required leagues. DeForest Buckner, even at 30, 31 years old, he still probably got 2, 3, 4 years left in the tank. You got DeForest Buckner, you don't have to worry about the position as long as he is healthy. I think that's the only caveat with him having missed a few games last year. But before that, it looks like the last time he missed a game was like 2020. And then before that, hardly at all since 2016. So cut him a little bit of slack here. DeForest Buckner is still going to be one of your top defensive tackles in fantasy football. Now, Trayvon Walker of the Jacksonville Jaguars is our DL 17 next. He's got a couple of seasons now with 50 or more tackles and 10 or more sacks. He's really showing us a solid floor, but I want to see him break through that ceiling that he's kind of placed on himself. I want to see him break through that 10 sack kind of cap he's put on himself. So Trayvon Walker will be fine. The first overall pick is finally making some waves in fantasy football IDP. But for now, we're going to keep him here as a defensive lineman 2 until he can show us that 101 overall upside. So like some Trayvon Walker, but not particularly excited. I haven't seen quite the kind of metrics or statistics that I'd like to see from this kind of player. Montez Sweat, now at DL 18 of the Chicago Bears. Another guy who's really come down in terms of IDP value after a down year last year. He had a career low in tackles and a near low in sacks. But he should bounce back this season with the expected improvement of this defensive line and the Chicago Bears as a whole. He's got an upside of about 12 sacks and 50 or more tackles, which is very good for us in IDP. Again, that 50 to 60 tackle floor is what we look for a full-time player. And then the fact that you can get double-digit sacks, 12 or more as an upside, is outstanding as well. So again, he's a guy that has more in much of his career been ranked in the higher end of the DL2 range. So again, a value potentially in your IDP league. I might kind of go out and kind of test the waters and see what the kind of value is for him for a guy like Montez Sweat at 28 here, especially in my dynasty leagues, because obviously you won't be trading at this point unless you've already drafted your redraft leagues. But nonetheless, I think we can expect a good bounce back season from Montez Sweat this year. Now at DL 19, we've got Josh Hines-Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's one of these mind-numbing players that always ends up finishing at the top. Last year, he really came down from his 17 sacks in 2023 to the 8 a year ago. Historically, he's a very, very boom-bust player, and if he doesn't get a sack, he's worthless to your team because he truly has his best tackling games when he converts a sack. We'll look at his stats. No joke. If he doesn't get a sack, then the floor just falls out. So he might get 5 or 6 on occasion, but he's often get 2 or 3 tackles unless he converts a sack. So Josh Hines-Allen is a player you kind of have to place here. He's got insane upside on a week-to-week basis where he can get you 8 tackles and 3 sacks and just completely win your week. But much of the season, you're going to be incredibly frustrated putting him into your lineup because this is where you drafted him. This is the value you put into him. You have no choice but to play him, and he's going to let you down much of the season. I despise players like that in terms of fantasy football. I like my consistency, so I will pass on a guy like this personally. But definitely, if you're a guy that likes to take big swings and go for more of those boom-bust kind of players, Josh Hines-Allen might be your guy. Good best ball guy, but redraft, not for me. Now we've got some Zach Sealer, defensive tackle of the Miami Dolphins. He's a lunch pail kind of dude. He's about the only healthy defensive lineman on Miami at this point, and he puts up a 60 tackle floor to go with 10 sacks 2 years in a row. He's a steady Eddie here who makes for a fine defensive lineman 2 with low overall upside, but a high floor and some reliability there. Then we've got Khalil Mack and Leonard Williams and our defensive lineman 2 category. They come in at defensive lineman 21 and 22. These vets are super close in my opinion. Khalil Mack just kind of has the higher upside, but Leonard has the higher floor. That's kind of what you're getting with these two. Mack is likely running on his last tank being, like 36 years old. He's a stat sheet stuffer, big play guy, but he's kind of more boom bust. He's got a really high week-to-week upside, but not really the kind of player I particularly like to try to guess on when it comes to setting my lineups. An outstanding best ball play, this guy can just completely win your week, but at the same time, in a little bit more glorified way of like Josh Hines Allen and with a little bit higher floor, he will just kind of disappear for you for much of the season again, but he can win 2 or 3 weeks for you all by himself. Then Leonard will give you about a 60 or more tackle floor, and he's pretty reliable week in and week out. You have a lot less worry with down games with Leonard Williams. So if I had to choose between these two, I'd probably go Leonard Williams myself. But Khalil Mack has that upside, and he has the higher overall finish year to year. That I think the upside supersedes the, I guess, in terms of overall ranking, just because this guy's going to perform, he's going to put up more points. My personal opinion is to take the guy who has the higher or the lower floor and maybe also the lower upside, or higher floor. Higher floor, but maybe lower overall upside, because that's something that I have to worry about less. When you have so many pieces on your fantasy football team, it's very valuable to find players that you don't necessarily have to worry about and overthink week to week. So Leonard Williams, I think, gives you that security. Khalil Mack gives you more upside in the potential to just flat out win your week for you, even in offense and combined leagues. But Leonard Williams is going to be this just, again, steady Eddie guy you can just rely on. You don't have to worry about, is this going to be a bad week? Is this going to be a good week? What kind of matchup is he playing? He's just one less player you have to worry about in terms of comparing these two kind of players. So that's my case for those two. Now we get into one of my favorite defensive linemen here at defensive lineman 23. I think Jonathan Cooper is a screaming value in fantasy football IDP leagues. Again, he's my favorite DL2. I've got him. I probably have him a lot higher than consensus, but call it hot takey. I think Jonathan Cooper has put pen to paper and proven that he belongs as a nice DL2. And Denver is one of the most aggressive defensive fronts under Sean Payton. I don't think that's going to change. But look at the numbers. They're one of the most highest pressure generating defenses in the league. And Jonathan Cooper himself presents a nice 58 to 60 tackle floor minimum and 70 tackle upside in terms of just fantasy football production. And then he also even upped his sack upside to the double-digit column, signed a new contract. I just think he's going to get better. Jonathan Cooper is going to play full-time snaps. He's in one of the highest pressure-generating defenses in the league, and the stats are backing that up. So I think so long as Jonathan Cooper is healthy and he's in this full-time role, he should reap the benefits of a team that's going to put constant pressure on the quarterback. And if I remember right, even as an edge rusher, he was one of the most blitzed players in the league at the position. If you go look at Pro Football Reference, they've got him among the top in terms of blitz packages. He's always back there. They like to rush him at the quarterback and just kind of mess things up back there. And he converts at a pretty good rate. So if he can even add to the kind of ceiling that he's already displayed so far in the NFL, let's see here. 10.5 sacks last year. He's got 2 sack upside and a week-to-week basis. But again, he's not going to fall flat for you in those in-between weeks. He's got 5 tackles on a game where he didn't convert. There was even a game, a game with 4 tackles, 3 tackles, 5 tackles. He's not really just going to completely fall flat. Now, there's obviously with defensive linemen, they have a tendency. It's hard to get a sack every single game. You're going to have guys that just kind of fall off. But he's not one of these guys that is going to just be completely unreliable and mind-numbingly just annoying to deal with, figure out where he's going to pop. He's going to do it more often than not. He's going to present a great floor, and we just hope that he's only 27. I think he's got a lot more room to improve. So Jonathan Allen with the Denver Broncos, I think, has more in the tank. Now we get into our final defensive lineman of the DL2s, we've got Dexter Lawrence of the New York Giants, who set a career high in sacks last season while having it cut short at the same time. This is one of the top defensive tackles in the league. Should Dexter Lawrence heal from his injury okay, he will be a force on the New York Giants defensive interior, while Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns rotate on the edges of this defensive line. He's a big play upside for a defensive tackle in the NFL, and he was outstanding. He was on a tear. He has 3 sack upside on a week-to-week basis. He's got the kind of floor that we like to see from our defensive tackles, or from our defensive linemen in general, let alone defensive tackles. If you're in a defensive tackle league, Dexter Lawrence is probably a great value right now on the injury discount. So I love me some Dexter Lawrence, but we just kind of want to see. Maybe I'm a little ambitious here putting him as a DL2 after his injury, but I just think he's got such a great supporting cast around him that they're going to help open up lanes for him to just essentially walk back to the quarterback and get some sacks, much like we were seeing last year. So adding Abdul Carter to the mix just, I think, even helps a guy on the defensive interior too. So that'll do it for our DL2 group. So before we get into our DL3s, let's talk about the Fantasy Football Expo. Get your 2025 Fantasy Football Expo tickets at thefantasyfootballexpo.com. It's this August, the 8th through the 10th in Canton, Ohio. Check out the new fan packages, and you can join us and other well-known content creators at the NFL Hall of Fame and Village. That's thefantasyfootballexpo.com to get your tickets today. Go in there, get your Fantasy Football Expo tickets, meet all your favorite content creators, have a good time. There's tons of good things and fun things to do. I wish I was going to be able to make it myself, but unfortunately, I will not be able to attend. I'll be there in spirit, though. So now let's talk some DL3s. Start us off here at DL25, Zach Allen of the Denver Broncos. DL26, we've got Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs. DL27, we've got Cam Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers. DL28, we've got Hassan Reddick of the Bucks. DL29, we've got Josh Sweat of the Cardinals. DL30, we've got Leatu Latu. DL31, we've got Tuli Tuipulotu of the Chargers. DL32, we've got Kayvon Thibodeau. DL33, we've got Kobe Turner of the LA Rams. DL34, we've got Quinnen Williams of the New York Jets. DL35, George Karlaftis of the Kansas City Chiefs. DL36, the wrap up our DL3s, we've got Jonathan Allen of the Minnesota Vikings. So to jump back up to the top of this group, let's touch on some Zach Allen, defensive tackle for the Denver Broncos. He's low-key a great DL3 value, even upwards of DL2 upside. He led all defensive tackles in the following categories according to PFF. Sacks with 12, quarterback hits with 28. He also led the defensive tackles in pressures with 75 pressures. And when you compare that to the overall defensive lineman pressures, he was even top 5 among all defensive linemen in pressures because he had his 75. Jared Verse was top 4 with 77, and that was among edge rushers, defensive tackles, and everybody. So the fact that a defensive tackle is back there generating 75 pressures on quarterbacks just leaves the door wide open for fantasy production here for Zach Allen. So he's got a solid floor, solid tackling floor as well of 60 or more tackles. He's shown us he's able to flirt with double-digit sacks. PFF says that he got 12 sacks last season, but I don't know. There's quite a discrepancy with Sleeper's actual fantasy points and production and stats that they're tracking, which actually ends up resulting in our fantasy football points. So I don't know. Take it for what you want. But nonetheless, PFF says he's doing better than what our fantasy football leagues are saying. So I think there's more in the tank for Zach Allen to even improve upon his 9 sack ceiling so far that he's presented in the NFL. And again, with the pressure numbers from last season, I think the opportunity is there for him to just completely, possibly even jump somehow on this defensive tackle list. So I think with 75 pressures, by far leading all defensive tackles, Zach Allen should continue to be a force in the league, and he could even jump up into DL2 category or even higher on the defensive tackle list here. So, and then another defensive tackle who is probably a great value right now, Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year he had his worst year statistically since 2024 in his rookie campaign, but to me this screams bounce back value. This is somebody who's kind of being left for dead compared to where he's been drafted and finished in IDP leagues. His ADP's fallen quite a bit, and he's shown 15 or more sack upside on more than one occasion. So we're kind of essentially, he's not being undrafted, but he's being left for dead from where he's been finishing and ultimately being drafted for much of his career. So I think Chris Jones, even at 31, 32, he's got a couple of years left in the tank, especially on that contract, presents the kind of ceiling that we like to see, and he's going to get full-time snaps. I think we see some positive regression from Chris Jones this year. So go test the waters on some Chris Jones value, and if you need a little bit of help, you might get a little bit of a cheat code there at your defensive tackle position. Another good defensive tackle here, Cam Hayward, defensive tackle 5 of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a timeless defensive tackle who's just always getting it done, still getting it done even at 36. He's got a 50 to 80 tackle floor for a defensive tackle, which is outstanding, and then you pair that with a 7 to 10 sack floor as well, and we've got a great and reliable defensive tackle and defensive lineman in general in our IDP leagues. So I should have another good year left in the tank after such a big year last year. The fact that he was able to put stats in the box score at the kind of rate that he did last year tells me that he's still got some left in the tank, and he's got a great supporting cast, which probably makes it easier on him as well. So I think we can rely on at least one more year from Cam Hayward. Really high floor player. He's just not really going to bring the kind of ceiling from guys above him. But again, draft a guy like this, forget about it. You don't have to worry about the position about all year unless he just completely falls off this season, which I don't anticipate that. I think we'll tend to see some regression before they just fall off. Now, defensive lineman 28, Haason Reddick might be a big swing here in the DL3 category, but should he be able to carve out a full-time role in Tampa Bay, I think, and also keep his act together after his debacle in 2024, should he be able to keep all of these things in check and get that full-time role, I think we're looking at an outstanding value. This is kind of like the good value range in your IDP league. So he's historically presented about a 50-ish tackle floor, and he's even got upside in the sack department of about 10 to 15 sacks. So we've got some great upside with a guy like Haason Reddick. We just hope that he can, again, carve out a full-time role, keep his attitude in check, and just stay on the field. Availability is the best ability. If you're not on the field, you're not going to score points. So we just want to see Haason Reddick bounce back, focus on his game. I think people are scared to draft him here. I've taken him in a couple of best ball leagues, just hoping on that upside, because that's kind of how you differentiate when people are fading somebody, and you can take them even still at a good value with the kind of upside that they have. A guy like Haason Reddick could really help you capitalize this season should he pay off. So my case for Haason Reddick there might be a little hot takey to have him so high, but again, he's presented more than enough proven production on the field for fantasy football that he should at least want a DL3 kind of ranking. Josh Sweat is another guy, DL 29 here for the Arizona Cardinals, now finds himself on a new team, new squad. I expect new life as well from this guy, because he's always been rotational in Philadelphia, just kind of the way they run their defense. They like to keep guys fresh, and Arizona's not going to play him that way. They absolutely need him. They just hardly have the bodies to fill at edge rusher, let alone with talent. So I think even in rotation, Josh Sweat has presented a nice 60 to 70% of snaps kind of guy, but if we can add another 10 to 15% of snaps, I think we can look at a pretty good ceiling for a player like this, because even with a 60 to 70 snap range, he still put up respectable numbers. We're looking at a 40 to 50 tackle floor, which isn't all that great, but considering the kind of rotational piece we were looking at, you kind of always knew that about Josh Sweat, that he was going to be a rotational piece, and that you kind of had to temper expectations with him in terms of a ceiling. But now he finds himself in a place where he could absolutely get 70 to 80% of the snaps, become a full-time player, and then bring that 40 to 50 tackle floor up to like 50 to 60, maybe even higher, and then bring that 6 sack floor and ceiling of 11 to maybe upwards of more like 10 to 12. And then we're looking at a guy who can really jump up and even be a DL2, maybe even a high DL2, depending on the kind of usage that he gets in Arizona. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Josh Sweat to really just completely pop off the page in 2025. So good group of defensive linemen here, I think, that are kind of hopefuls and in great opportunities to make a bounce back or make a jump up this list here with like the last 5 guys that I mentioned. Now we've got DL 30, Latu, second-year edge rusher for the Indianapolis Colts. He's a first-round prospect coming off an injury. We saw flashes last year. He should be full-time. But for young guys like this that haven't put anything on the stat sheet and shown me proven production in fantasy football, I generally don't like to go for rookies or second-year players unless they've already popped in terms of drafting for redraft leagues. I'm just not huge on taking risks kind of like that. But if the value should definitely be there when you're drafting. If you want to take a swing on a guy like this, the talent is there. He's a great prospect. Again, a first-round draft capital. I think he should be fine, but I don't know to what level he's going to be performing. And coming off an injury, coupled with that fact, I'm the kind of person that's probably going to pass and go a different position at this point in my drafts, just because of so much uncertainty. But again, he's shown us that he has the kind of skills that we want to see. We just don't quite know the ceiling. So he did show some flashes last year, but I think I'm tempering expectations here personally. So then we get into another similar player in Tuipulotu for the Chargers, who is now going to be taking over Joey Bosa's former spot. And Joey Bosa's proven that this position and role in the Chargers defense can yield some great IDP numbers. Small sample size from Tuipulotu showed great promise, but I just want to see more than just a small sample. So last year, whenever Joey Bosa went down, Tuipulotu came in and presented some really high week-to-week upside. I just want to kind of see that floor. We saw that upside in a short span, but when offensive lines aren't really game planning for this kind of guy, it makes sense that he might be able to pop. So now that they have time to see what kind of player he is and account for him, I just want to see that floor. We've seen the ceiling. I want to see the floor. I'm a very floor-oriented kind of fantasy manager where I like to keep my floor as consistent and reliable and as high as I possibly can. I'm not really much of a person who's going to take huge swings on upside unless it's just undeniable. So Tuipulotu, I think he should be fine. He should get a full-time role in the Chargers defense, and the kind of upside he presented is great. I don't know the kind of floor that he's going to have. Is he going to be a Josh Hines-Allen where he's going to get all of 90% of his production in a handful of weeks and then just leave you flat the rest of the time? I have no idea. So that's my only concern with Tuipulotu here. But with the kind of upside he's presented, should he be able to put together a whole season with that kind of production? We could see some pretty high finish from Tuipulotu this year. But again, tempering expectations, we haven't quite seen it yet. The opportunity is great. Again, another guy with some great opportunity here. We just haven't quite seen the kind of season-long production that we want to make, that we need to in order to make a case to move him up our ranks. Now we've got DL 32, Kayvon Thibodeaux of the New York Giants. Kayvon is an outright steal in drafts. Just a year ago, he was ranked as a DL 2 in many rankings throughout the community. But I figured that the reason he's seen a drop in value now is obviously due to the addition of Abdul Carter via the draft. But remember, rookie edges take time to come around, so I don't anticipate that Abdul Carter is just going to come in and take his spot. Very few rookie IDPs pop year one. So Kayvon was extended even after they drafted Abdul Carter, so they plan to use him, or at least make somebody pay up for him, which I don't imagine is going to happen at this point. He's got a high DL2 upside and is going as DL3 or later in drafts. He's already shown us a nice 50 tackle floor and a near 12 sack upside. As a former first-round pick, I think there's more left in the tank. This defensive line is among the best in the league. I think this defense is going to look a lot different next year once everybody gets healthy. And I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is going to get more back to that kind of ceiling play that we saw in his 12 sack season. Now we've got some Kobe Turner, defensive tackle for the LA Rams, comes in at DL 33. Then we've got Quinnen Williams, another defensive tackle, DL 34, right there behind him for the New York Jets. Two stud defensive tackles here. Kobe presents the more steady floor and respectable ceiling, but I think Quinnen Williams has more of the higher upside. They both sit at about a 50 to 60 tackle floor. Quinnen can just reach that 12, 10 plus sack upside. His next best after his 12 sack season was 7. So he's displayed the upside, but we haven't really seen a consistent kind of upside with him. So he's fallen flat. And I think Kobe Turner in just his first couple of years has already kissing double digit sacks and presented a nice 8 to 9 sack floor to go with that 50 to 60 tackle floor as well. It's just, to me, more reliable, less headache. Quinnen Williams is a great prospect, and I think he should be performing better than he is. But we just haven't quite seen the consistency that we want from a guy like this. And at this point in your drafts, I think Kobe Turner is the better play if you're choosing between these two. Now we get into a little bit of George Karlaftis, DL 35 of the Kansas City Chiefs. He should be pretty ho-hum for him this season with no major personnel changes. He sits right around 30 to 40 tackles and 8 to 10 sacks in a season. He's a low floor, low ceiling kind of player who often makes the most of his opportunities. He can add some quarterback hits, especially if your league scores quarterback hits. He was first in the league in that category last season. Then he can add tackles for loss and such. So it doesn't completely suck if he doesn't convert sacks, but it's not great, and he's not going to get a sack more often than not. He doesn't have the game-breaking upside, but he'll spread the love. His 8 to 10 sacks will come throughout the year, and he will end up being productive for you when he does get a sack. The points for quarterback hits and tackles for loss look a lot better, and he does kind of have somewhat of a floor if he doesn't get those sacks. The quarterback hits and such will also help prop up his floor as well. We just don't have a huge ceiling for a guy like this, but somebody you can kind of expect to come in, do the bare minimum, and be okay for your team. Even if he doesn't completely convert, he's going to have a pretty respectable floor, even though he doesn't necessarily get all the tackles in the world. He doesn't have that tackling floor that we like to see. He's able to add to it with points from other statistical categories that count for us in IDP. So he's not a very sexy kind of player, but he's a guy that will get the job done. I actually just got him in as a piece in a deal for me to kind of go as a replacement player, as a backup, a DL4 type personally for me, just because of the kind of roster that I had. So he's a guy that I feel comfortable sliding in if I have a guy on a bye week or something like that. So my case for George Karlaftis, I don't think we see a whole lot bigger ceiling, but I mean, he's back there. Him and Chris Jones are a pretty good pair. We could see him jump up, but the way this this defense operates, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of meat on the bone for him to really just completely jump up. Now to round out the defensive lineman threes, we've got Jonathan Allen, defensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. He has new life in Minnesota, and he's joining fellow newcomer Javon Hargrave as they'll likely rotate with Harrison Phillips. Allen is the most experienced and proven asset on defensive interior, and I think he should see the lion's share of the snaps. Historically, he's looking at a 60 tackle floor to go with about an 8 to 9 sack upside, which isn't bad at all for a defensive tackle. A veteran like this is going as a steal in fantasy football drafts right now. Nobody's really valuing him at all, and it's probably because they expect some sort of rotation. But again, I think he could get 60 to 70% of snaps here on this defensive interior. And with the kind of pass rush that they have among the top of the league and generating pressure on the defensive line, I think that, again, much like a guy like Dexter Lawrence, it's just going to pave the way for production for him, having the kind of edge rushing talent that he has in Dallas Turner and Grenard and APG, and blitzing linebackers like Ivan Pace. So I think that Jonathan Allen is due for a big bounce back year, and I'm drafting him as a DL3 in my drafts as well. Probably higher than consensus, but he's proven that he has DL2 upside. So I'm going to take advantage of that value. Quickly before we get to the last leg of our show and get into the DL4s, please consider a subscription to the website if you enjoy what you've seen. We have tons more to offer through the subscription at idpplus.com. Try it for a month. Check out the Team Snap tool, the Fantasy Points Allowed by Position tool. Check out the rankings that Dynasty Santa keeps updated. Articles, betting content, get into the YouTube, even jump into the Discord and chat it up with our members. Ask your questions and get them answered at any time. Consider a subscription today. Go check out the website, see what we have to offer. If you like it, sign up for a few more months. If you don't, no hard feelings. You gave it your best shot. You gave us a try, and I appreciate that. So, but I think should you give this subscription a try, I think you'll find that you'll be happy with what we have to offer. And we've got a few good things coming down the pipeline as well. So some things to look forward to there as well. Now let's jump into our DL4s. We've got Gregory Rousseau at DL 37 of the Buffalo Bills. At DL 38, we've got Byron Young of the LA Rams. Alex Highsmith comes in at DL 39 of the Pittsburgh Steelers. DL 40 is Kyle Van Noy of the Baltimore Ravens. DL 41, Nolan Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. DL 42, Will McDonald of the New York Jets. DL 43, Chop Robinson of the Miami Dolphins. DL 44, Jermaine Johnson of the New York Jets. DL 45, DJ Wanham of the Carolina Panthers. DL 46, Carl Granderson of the New Orleans Saints. DL 47, Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. And then to round out our DL4s, we've got Yaya Diaby of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So go back to the top of this list. We've got Gregory Rousseau, who had a career year last year, propped up by a 3-sack game in week 1. He's also got that 50 tackle floor, so that's nice. He finally developed a kind of floor for us in fantasy football. It'd be tough for him to really hit his true ceiling of what we really want to see from a guy like this in the Buffalo Bills rotation, because so far, as long as I've been playing IDP Fantasy Football, Buffalo Bills defensive linemen don't really get full-time roles comparatively to the rest of the league. He's going to sit at about 60 to 70 percent of snaps a game. And if this is the kind of ceiling that we're going to get from him, or the kind of floor that he's now going to develop in his 4th or 5th year, I like him as a late DL3, DL4 type, but he's just, that's about all you're going to get is maybe one big boom week, and then he's just going to kind of disappear. I'm not really a huge fan of Gregory Rousseau, where he often gets drafted. He will go as like a DL2 type, and I'm just not convinced that he's going to end up finishing in the kind of situation that he's in. Should he get out of Buffalo, then I like the upside that he could possibly present on a new team with a new role, full-time snaps. But as long as he's in Buffalo, he's going to be kind of stuck in a rotation, and he's going to be capped in that aspect as well. Byron Young has a higher floor than Greg Rousseau, but a lower week-to-week ceiling, because he's not going to have that 3-sack upside like Greg Rousseau did in his first week last year. But he's more consistent, in my opinion, and a nice 7 to 8 sack floor in 2 seasons of the NFL to pair with a 60 tackle floor is pretty nice. I mean, he's more of a guy that you can rely on week in and week out. He's going to have a nice baseline for tackles each week, and he's just not going to have that upside. So it just kind of depends on the kind of manager that you are. Are you looking for more of an upside swing week to week, or are you looking for more of a steady Eddie, a guy that you don't have to worry about? Byron Young is going to be a guy who can get a couple of sacks in a game, but he's not just going to win the week for you. Gregory Rousseau could, but it's which week is it? That's your guess. So to me, not really into guessing games like that. So Byron Young would probably be my play here if I were to choose between these two. So now we get into a little Alex Highsmith of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll be the first to admit I'm extremely low on Highsmith. I see him go as DL2 or 3 often, but I see him in the same breath as like a Josh Hines Allen. He's one of those players who is mind-numbing to own, because you really can't rely on his play at all. And now even when Watt goes down, you can't rely on him either, because Herbig pops too. So it's like, he's the epitome of a boom bust player, more of a best ball guy in my opinion, but I'm not much for my Alex Highsmith. I will go defensive back. I will go anywhere before I pick any kind of Alex Highsmith, and often he's well off the board before I'm even ready to take a guy like this. So I do not advocate for Alex Highsmith. If you're very much a boom bust type of player or manager in fantasy football and you like to take swings on guys like this, he could perform upwards of a DL2 finish, but it's all going to come on the back of a handful of games. So if you want a guy late in drafts, he ends up falling, he could be a value, but where he gets drafted, where I see, not particularly a guy I am going to be targeting. So we'll move into some Kyle Van Noy, defensive lineman for the Baltimore Ravens. Historically, he's just a guy who's had a pretty good ceiling. He's just kind of getting up there in age, and last year having been his best season to date with 12.5 sacks, I think we can expect a little positive progression. But historically, we're still looking at a nice 60 to 70 tackle floor. Usually, in the last few years, it's dropped to 30 to 40. So I will just kind of have to see how he kind of plays out in his third year in Baltimore. I think he's starting to kind of settle in now. We've seen him jump up in terms of production from 2023 to 2024. But again, being 34, there's not a whole lot of room for improvement in terms of talent here and production. So a guy like this probably has reached his ceiling. But again, week in, week out, he could get you 2 sacks in a game. And like last year, he had 4 multi-sack games. So if you're going to do a boom bust guy, in my opinion, this is the way to do it, because he's going to give you a nice tackling floor. He's gotten even up to 89 tackles, which wasn't something that he's done multiple years. But he has the capability to add that floor level to you. And then he's also got 2 sack upside where he can just win several weeks for you. But then in between, again, a guy that you're not really going to enjoy in the in-between weeks where he can kind of fall off. But instead of a guy like Alex Highsmith, I think a Kyle Van Noy is going to give you more reliable boom weeks, if that even makes sense. I think he's gonna give you somewhat more stable floor for a boom bust guy, but either way, not really guys that I'm heavily targeting in my drafts. I'd rather go after guys like Hassan Reddick and guys that are kind of going the same ADP range, but also have probably a more stable floor historically and also a higher ceiling in terms of overall finish and consistency as well. So that's why they're obviously ranked differently here. So Nolan Smith, edge rusher for the Philadelphia Eagles, comes in at defensive lineman 41. We saw him pop on the scene late last year in the playoffs, and I'm kind of projecting a little bit here because we haven't seen him play in this role for a full season yet. But considering the moves that the Eagles have made in the offseason, departing with Bryce Huff, I think that we can expect Nolan Smith to take the lion's share of the snaps here, and the kind of production that we saw late last season, I think we can expect a pretty good year from Nolan Smith. So we're hesitantly probably ranking him here in Philadelphia's defensive lineman rotation. Will McDonald is kind of in the same breath as Nolan Smith, where they both kind of have about the same tackle floor, about 40 to 50, and then also has the kind of a similar ceiling as well in terms of sacks, in my opinion. If you were to project out Nolan Smith's full year in his role last year, I think they look similar in terms of the sack department. But Will Anderson, I think, has a higher week-to-week upside. So if you're looking for a floor player, I think Nolan Smith's going to be your guy. If you're looking for a ceiling player between these two, I think you're looking at Will McDonald. So I think a couple of years ago, had a couple of games where he had multiple sacks. So last year, he kind of leveled it off a little bit. No, that was last year. Early in the season, 3 sacks, 2 sacks, but then he leveled it off and kind of spread out the level a little bit throughout the season. So, like me some Will McDonald, I think he's got more left in the tank as well. He's got some upside to him. Then we got Chop Robinson, DL 43 for the Miami Dolphins. Again, we're kind of projecting for a few of these guys, but he comes into a great position in Miami where there's not a whole lot of healthy guys. He's going to be in a full-time role. I don't think he's going to have much threat to him in terms of play this season, and he's presented a respectable enough upside. So I think here at DL 43 and DL 4 for your rosters, I think Chop Robinson should be a fine player for you this season. Jermaine Johnson, I've got here at DL 44. I've only got him so low just because he's coming off an injury. We're just going to take his play with a little grain of salt here, where he could have DL2 upside should he come back to form. But Jermaine Johnson is one of those guys that you just kind of want to wait and see because he hasn't presented game-breaking upside, but he's presented a nice little floor here. We just kind of rank him hesitantly with coming off of that injury. So, but if you look at our YouTube page, Doc seems to think he'll be just fine. So we just might expect a little slow start. He could be a value this year. Then we got DL 45. DJ Wanham is a guy who's had a pretty high ceiling. He popped once and then kind of fell back off, but he's getting a lot of snaps. He's among the top of the league in just getting snaps, and then he's also got a respectable upside as well in the sack department a couple of years ago, where he got 8 sacks and 60 tackles. Had a nice season for us in IDP, his best season yet. I think he could be a steal as well if he can go back to that kind of production. Last season, he fell short, but in just 8 games, he was on his way to a nice 70-plus tackle, 8 or more sack season for IDP last year. So DJ Wanham's a sneaky value. I think he's a guy who's going to surprise you at this point in your drafts. He's kind of left for dead. You probably get him as a DL5, and he's going to put up DL3, 2 numbers more often than not. So we just want to see that kind of play out again for the course of an entire season. He's kind of been up and down so far overall. So we're just hoping that maybe this year he's going to bounce back to that upside play. And we got Carl Granderson, DL 46, the New Orleans Saints. Carl Granderson has kind of been a guy, again, who popped for a sack and then just kind of fell back a little bit, where a couple years ago he had 8.5 sacks, his best year yet. Last year he jumped back down to 5.5, but he still has a nice 50 to 70 tackle floor, which is outstanding for defensive linemen. And then we've seen the upside of 8 or more sacks. I think his role is going to just stay the same. He could have upside of a DL3, possibly even a back-end DL2, depending on the situation. We just want to see how New Orleans plays this year, because and maybe even considering the state of the offense, might be a case for him to jump up. If the offense is not going to be on the field a lot and the defense is, Carl Granderson may get more runs, so it might be a good value here. Then we've got some Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans. Presented a nice 5-sack floor for us in IDP, and then also to go with a 50 to 60 tackle floor as well as a nice defensive tackle for the defensive or for your defensive tackle required leagues. And I think Jeff Simmons is going to give you a nice week-to-week floor as well, where you can kind of rely on 4 to 5 tackles roughly a game. Might be a couple games where he just falls off, but more often than not, he's gonna, even if he doesn't convert a sack, he's still gonna give you respectable floor play. Now Yaya Diaby rounding us out here. I like some Yaya Diaby on this defense. Should continue to improve upon his rotational role. I think he should get more of a full-time role this year, considering the state of this defense. They're kind of a little thin here at edge rusher, so I think that after Yaya Diaby's end to last season, I think he's earned himself some more playing time here. And he's one of those guys that hardly misses a game so far in 2 years. He hasn't missed a game. We just want to see him kind of jump right into that full-time role and run with it, because he presented a nice 50 tackle floor for us last season, and then we've seen him get upwards of 7.5 sacks overall this season as well. So you pair those two together, I think this can be the year that Yaya Diaby pairs the sacks with the tackles, and we see a nice player. Should he do that, we can see him jump up to DL3, DL2 territory as well. So like some Yaya Diaby for 2025. That's going to do it for defensive lineman rankings for 2025 season. Again, as I mentioned earlier, should you have any questions, you want a more in-depth kind of outlook, reasoning why somebody's so high or low, or like just a general outlook on a certain player, go ahead and throw it in the comments and I will get to each and every one of you. Might even throw a short or something out there to kind of elaborate on my thoughts on a certain player depending on who's asked. So thank you everybody for joining me. I know this was a longer show, but thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found some value in this, and if you did, let me know in the comments. I'd really appreciate some feedback. If there's some things that I'm missing here, or you feel like I'm way out of whack on some guys, let's talk about it in the comments as well. So again, thank you. Go check out Fast Draft, check out the website, consider a subscription, and check out all of our wonderful content on our YouTube channels. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you next week on another week of the IDP Plus podcast. So see you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.